Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a massive, frankly, counterintuitive demographic shift that is completely turning our understanding of modern culture and faith upside down. If you follow the mainstream cultural conversation, you probably think you already know the story about young people in religion. But as we're going to see today, the actual data is telling an entirely different and honestly super fascinating story. Let's get right into it.
So the big question on everyone's mind, is Gen Z abandoning faith? The popular narrative out there tells us society is just becoming completely secular, drifting further and further away from organized religion. And we always hear that the younger generations are the ones driving this secularization, right? Well, hold on. Because the source material we're looking at today reveals something completely contrary to that expectation. The data actually shows that young people are not abandoning faith at all. Instead, they're quietly reshaping it from the inside out.
There is just a massive disconnect between myth and reality here. The myth, a complete secular takeover where organized religion just kind of fades into the background. But the reality, which is backed up by recent demographic data, is a spiritual resurgence driven precisely by Gen Z and millennials. While everyone just assumes young people are leaving organized religion in droves, the source material shows us they're actually leading this hopeful, really dynamic resurgence. They're actively seeking out spiritual alternatives to the secular world they grew up in.
Check out this number, 1.9 times per month. According to data from organizations like the Barna Group, that is how often the typical Gen Z churchgoer is actively choosing to attend. Actually, let that sink in for a second. For the first time, millennials and Gen Z are literally outpacing older generations as the most regular churchgoers. Think about what that really means. A generation with endless digital choices, streaming platforms, a million weekend activities, they are making a conscious, active choice to consistently show up to organized religious gatherings. This isn't just some passive habit handed down to them, it is a highly intentional pursuit.
Section 1. Driven by digital disillusionment.
Okay, so what's driving this? The sources point to a deep disillusionment with secular culture, rooted in what we call digital isolation. Gen Z is the first generation to grow up completely immersed in a digital environment. But here's the wild paradox. Despite being connected to everyone all the time, many feel completely isolated. It's this psychological struggle, a really pervasive anxiety stemming from a world saturated with digital noise, endless information, and constant social comparison. So they're hyper-connected technologically, but deeply disconnected relationally. And let's look at the specific drivers of this anxiety. The sources identify things like climate change, intense political polarization, digital noise, and the sheer exhaustion of social comparison as massive contributors. Young people are navigating a relentless barrage of heavy, global information on their screens literally every single day. And the crucial point here is that they aren't looking for an echo chamber that just repeats this anxiety back to them. No, they are actively seeking a safe, grounding place to process it all.
Gen Z has extensively explored what secular digital culture has to offer. They grew up with the likes, the shares, the follower counts, but ultimately this fleeting online validation has been found to be wanting. It simply doesn't satisfy that core human need for deep purpose and genuine hope. They're just exhausted by the superficial, They are yearning for an authentic spiritual alternative that offers something solid in a very, very shifting world.
Which brings us to Section 2, the power of radical honesty. So, the necessary shift for these faith communities is moving from curated perfection to radical honesty. In the past, institutional religion often relied on presenting this flawless, polished image, while now, successful faith communities have to drop that pretense. By embracing radical honesty about personal and collective struggles, whether that's anxiety, doubt, mental health, leaders are creating that countercultural space that young people actually crave. It is all about prioritizing truth and vulnerability over putting on a performance. And this is absolutely crucial, because this generation is highly attuned to authenticity. Think about it. They have been marketed to their entire lives, meaning they can spot hypocrisy from a mile away. They will flatly reject superficial experiences or traditional, formal pretenses. If a community claims to have all the answers and tries to hide its flaws, Gen Z just won't engage. But when they encounter genuine vulnerability, it fosters a profound sense of authentic belonging. Moving on to Section 3, Faith Meets Real-World Issues. This right here gives modern faith leaders a really practical playbook. It shows exactly how ancient biblical wisdom is being used to directly address modern, real-world anxieties. Take climate anxiety, for example. The response is providing a narrative of divine purpose and stewardship. For mental health struggles, the remedy isn't just ignoring the problem. It's creating safe spaces for difficult conversations and vulnerability. And in the face of intense political polarization, successful communities are offering countercultural values, things like sacrifice, forgiveness, and love, rather than getting dragged into self-serving cultural divides.
But the ultimate goal here isn't just to sit around and talk about problems, it's to empower action. By bridging faith in daily life, spiritual mentors are helping young people transform their anxiety and paralysis into tangible action. Giving them an opportunity to serve a cause that matters, something larger than themselves, provides a really meaningful sense of agency. It shifts the focus away from their internal anxieties and redirects it toward an external, purposeful calling. It's a real game changer.
And that leads us to Section 4, Mastering Digital Discipleship. Okay, so we've established that digital noise is a primary driver of Gen Z's anxiety. But does that mean successful faith communities are just, rejecting technology entirely? Actually, no. Rather than treating the digital world as completely negative or making it the enemy, the sources reveal that thriving faith communities are adapting to it. They recognize technology as the native language of young adults. So instead of fighting it, they embrace it as a strategic tool. The goal isn't to add to the digital noise, but to use these platforms to facilitate and deepen genuine relational connections right where Gen Z already spends their time. There's a very clear progression to this strategy. Step 1 is meeting them where they are, providing authentic spiritual alternatives online. Step 2 is using digital platforms to bridge the gaps between physical in-person gatherings, which offers continuous mentorship throughout the week. And Step 3 is mobilizing them for tangible, real-world action. The major takeaway here is that technology is never used to replace physical community. It's strategically leveraged to support, expand, and really deepen those crucial real-world relationships.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this provocative question drawn directly from the core of our source material. Is your community offering curated perfection or authentic belonging? Whether you are a leader, a mentor, or simply someone observing this massive cultural shift, the data is crystal clear. The next generation isn't looking for a polished performance. They're desperate for truth, for real connection, and for a purpose that actually matters. It's a surprising comeback for sure, and it's being built entirely on the foundation of authenticity. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating data.